The empire glittered in gold and marble. From the highest balcony of the palace, the emperor appeared untouchable, crowned in jewels, robed in crimson silk, praised by generals and priests alike. Trumpets announced his decisions, courtiers bowed at his footsteps, coins bore his profile, and decrees carried his seal. To the people, he was destiny itself. But behind the throne, beyond the carved pillars and silk-draped halls, there was another presence. She never wore a crown. She never stood before cheering crowds. Her name was rarely spoken beyond whispers. Yet ministers waited for her nod before advising the emperor. Generals sought her counsel before marching to war. Even rival nobles measured their ambitions against her unseen influence. She understood something the emperor never fully grasped. Power was not the throne. Power was proximity to it. As a young girl, she had entered the palace not as royalty, but as a companion to a lesser noblewoman. She learned quickly that survival required silence. She observed everything: who bowed too low, who smiled too widely, who lingered too long in private corridors. While others competed for attention, she mastered invisibility. Years passed, emperors changed, factions rose and collapsed, yet she remained. Her greatest strength was patience. She allowed others to underestimate her. Let them think her a listener, a quiet presence in embroidered robes. Let them forget she was in the room. One winter night, when rebellion stirred in the northern provinces, the emperor panicked. Advisors argued violently in the council chamber. Some urged brutal suppression, others pleaded for negotiation. The empire trembled on the edge of civil war. The emperor turned almost instinctively toward the shadowed alcove. She spoke only one sentence: "Starve their pride, not their children." The strategy that followed, cutting trade routes to rebellious nobles while protecting villages, broke the uprising without igniting hatred among the people. The emperor received the credit. Songs were written in his honor. Her name was never mentioned. And so it would continue. History would remember the man on the throne, but the empire moved at the whisper of a woman history chose to forget. Power, she learned, was rarely loud. The emperor believed strength meant commanding armies and issuing proclamations. She knew strength meant shaping the choices presented before him. Every morning, reports arrived: tax records, border tensions, rumors from distant provinces. Before they reached the throne, they passed through careful hands. Information could be sharpened like a blade or softened like silk. She never altered facts outright. That would have been dangerous. Instead, she arranged them. A rebellion described as growing unrest became isolated dissatisfaction. A minor insult from a neighboring kingdom became calculated provocation. Words guided emotions, and emotions guided decisions. Courtiers began to notice patterns. Policies that bore the emperor's signature often echoed her earlier private suggestions. Trade expanded where she had family allies. Rivals found themselves reassigned to distant posts just as their influence threatened stability. Yet she made no obvious enemies. When confronted directly, she smiled gently and deferred to the emperor's wisdom. When praised, she redirected credit. When criticized, she absorbed it quietly. Her influence extended beyond politics. Marriages were arranged with her subtle approval. Generals promoted with her silent endorsement. Even the selection of tutors for royal heirs passed beneath her gaze. She cultivated loyalty not through fear, but through understanding. She remembered the names of servants' children. She sent discreet gifts to grieving widows of fallen soldiers. She ensured grain shipments reached drought-stricken villages before desperation turned to revolt. The emperor saw her as indispensable, but harmless. That illusion was her shield. In truth, she stood at the center of an invisible web. Threads stretched from noble estates to merchant guilds, from temple priests to frontier commanders. Tug one thread, and the empire shifted. Still, she avoided the spotlight. History adored spectacle. It had little patience for subtlety. And so she continued shaping destiny from the shadows, knowing that the brightest crowns cast the darkest blind spots. War arrived not with drums, but with insult. A neighboring ruler sent a diplomatic gift, lavish, glittering, and deliberately disrespectful. Hidden within the tribute was a message questioning the emperor's legitimacy. The court erupted in outrage. Generals demanded retaliation. Young nobles, eager for glory, urged immediate invasion. The emperor's pride flared like wildfire. But she saw beyond the provocation. War was never about honor alone. It was about timing. She requested a private audience, no witnesses, no scribes. "Your Majesty," she said calmly, "if you strike now, you fight on their chosen ground. If you wait, you choose the season, the alliances, and the narrative." The emperor hesitated. Over the next months, she quietly strengthened border fortresses. She encouraged trade deals that isolated the rival kingdom. She persuaded neutral states to lean toward their side without ever signing a formal pact. When the empire finally marched, it was not in anger, but in certainty. The campaign was swift. Supply lines held firm. Allies blocked reinforcements. The rival ruler fell within a year. The emperor entered the conquered capital in triumph. Crowds hailed him as a conqueror. Statues would later commemorate his victory. Chronicles would detail his brilliant foresight. No scroll recorded the private council that delayed the first strike, or the quiet diplomacy that ensured success. She watched the celebrations from a balcony, unseen. War had reshaped the map, and she had chosen when it began. Empires do not fall in a single battle. They fall in succession. The emperor's health began to decline quietly. Whispers spread through corridors. Nobles calculated possibilities. Ambitious cousins strengthened private guards. But she focused on one thing: the heir. The prince was intelligent but impulsive, charismatic but easily flattered. If guided poorly, he would undo decades of stability within years. She arranged for new tutors, historians who taught consequences, philosophers who taught restraint, strategists who valued patience over pride. In the palace gardens, she spoke to him not as a ruler, but as a student of power. "Remember," she once told him, "the loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest." He listened. When the emperor finally passed, the transition was smoother than rivals expected. Decrees had already been drafted, alliances reaffirmed, potential challengers reassured or quietly neutralized. The young emperor ascended the throne with confidence beyond his years. Chroniclers praised his composure. They never recorded who prepared him. She had shaped 2 reigns without wearing the crown, and history once again turned its gaze toward the man in gold, never noticing the woman who ensured the empire endured. The new emperor ruled with confidence, but confidence invited challenge. In the second year of his reign, unrest did not come from distant borders. It rose from within the capital itself. A powerful noble house, wealthy from generations of trade, began gathering quiet support. Their banquets grew more crowded, their gifts to military commanders more generous, their whispers more dangerous. They believed the young emperor could be steered. They were wrong. But he did not know how to fight shadows with shadows. She did. For weeks, she said nothing publicly. She attended ceremonies, offered calm advice, and listened. Servants moved through corridors carrying trays and rumors alike. Merchants complained of delayed contracts. A minor official vanished from court without explanation. Threads were tightening. One evening, she summoned the emperor privately. "If you strike them openly," she warned, "you create martyrs. If you ignore them, you create a rival throne." He frowned. "Then what do you suggest?" She smiled faintly. "Make them indispensable, and then make them accountable." The strategy unfolded slowly. The noble house was granted prestigious responsibilities, overseeing grain distribution and funding new infrastructure. Publicly, it looked like trust. Privately, it was exposure. When a minor famine struck a border province, grain shipments failed to arrive on time. Documents, carefully preserved, revealed mismanagement and hoarding. The court turned swiftly. The same nobles who once toasted rebellion now distanced themselves. The powerful house was fined, stripped of certain privileges, and quietly divided through strategic marriages and reassignment of lands. No execution, no public spectacle, just erosion. The emperor was praised for his measured justice. His reputation for fairness strengthened. Stability returned. But that night, alone in her chamber, she stared at the flickering candlelight and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Power always demanded payment. She had protected the throne again, yet each victory deepened her isolation. Trust was a currency she could never spend freely. Even those who relied on her could never fully know her. History would remember this period as the era of calm governance. Scholars would analyze economic reforms and political restructuring. They would not see the quiet orchestration behind it. She did not crave statues or songs, but sometimes, in the stillness of midnight, she wondered what it might feel like to exist beyond the margins of someone else's legacy. The empire stood firm, and once more, her name remained unwritten. Power attracts loyalty, but it also attracts envy. By the 6th year of the young emperor's reign, the empire was prosperous. Trade routes flourished, borders were secure, the treasury overflowed. To the public, it was proof of wise leadership. To those who watched more closely, it was proof that someone unseen was guiding the throne. Rumors began as whispers among lesser courtiers. She advises too often. The emperor trusts her more than his generals. Without her, would he rule at all? She had expected resistance from ambitious nobles. What she had not expected was doubt from someone closer. The emperor had grown stronger, more confident, exactly as she intended. But confidence, once rooted, seeks independence. One evening, he dismissed her counsel during a heated debate about raising taxes to fund a grand monument celebrating his father's victories. She advised caution. The people admired stability, not extravagance. He chose spectacle. The monument's construction began. Taxes rose modestly. Public approval dipped not dangerously, but noticeably. Opposition found its opening. A rival faction within the court approached the emperor privately. They spoke carefully, planting seeds of suspicion. She holds too much influence. She shapes what information reaches you. An empire should not rely on a single unseen voice. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes when he looked at her. She saw it immediately, and she understood something painful. The greatest threat to her position was not ambition, it was mistrust. Instead of defending herself, she withdrew slightly. She attended fewer private councils. She allowed other advisors to speak first. She permitted minor mistakes to unfold naturally. The monument project spiraled over budget. Corruption seeped into contracts. The same nobles who had encouraged it quietly distanced themselves when criticism grew louder among merchants and provincial governors. Finally, the emperor summoned her. "You warned me," he admitted quietly. She did not smile. Majesty, an empire survives errors. It does not survive isolation. He studied her carefully. "They say I depend on you too much." She met his gaze without fear. "Then depend on wisdom, not on me. If others offer better counsel, listen to them." It was the most dangerous thing she had ever said, because it was true. Power is strongest when it appears unnecessary. In the weeks that followed, he corrected the monument project, reduced the tax burden, and publicly accepted responsibility. His credibility recovered. Trust between them, however, had changed, not broken, but tested. For the first time in decades, she realized her position was no longer secured by invisibility alone. If she fell, she would not fall to an enemy's blade. She would fall to history's oldest weapon: doubt. Decades passed. The emperor became legend. His reign was remembered as an era of unity, discipline, and enduring prosperity. Statues rose in public squares. Children memorized his speeches. Scholars praised his strategic brilliance and political restraint. Time simplified the story. It always does. The palace changed hands. New rulers redecorated old halls. Tapestries were replaced. Records were reorganized. Entire wings were sealed and forgotten. In a quiet archive room thick with dust, a young historian searched for something else entirely: tax reforms from an earlier period. Instead, he found a bundle of private correspondence bound in faded silk. The letters were unsigned, but they were precise. They analyzed rebellions before they erupted. They predicted border conflicts months in advance. They recommended marriages that later proved politically essential. They advised restraint where others demanded force. The handwriting was consistent across two reigns. The tone never changed, measured, observant, patient. Curious, the historian cross-referenced council records. In moments of major decisions, there was often a curious gap in documentation, a meeting listed without details, an advisor referenced without a title. He followed the pattern. Behind nearly every defining choice of that golden era, there was evidence of a guiding voice, never credited, never formally recognized. In one fragile letter preserved by accident more than intention, a final line appeared. An empire must believe in the strength of its ruler. If my presence weakens that belief, then my absence will serve it better. No name followed. The historian felt a strange weight as he closed the scroll. History had not hidden her by accident. It had hidden her because she allowed it. In the grand narrative of conquest and crowns, there was little room for the architect who preferred shadows to applause. She had understood the cost of visible power. She had chosen influence over recognition, endurance over glory. Outside the archive, visitors walked past towering statues of the emperor. Guides repeated familiar stories. Tourists admired marble inscriptions. No one spoke of the woman who shaped the map, secured the succession, restrained wars, and strengthened peace. Yet her fingerprints were everywhere, woven into policy, etched into borders, embedded in the stability that defined an age. Empires rarely collapse from a single failure. They endure because someone, somewhere, makes the right decision at the right time and does not demand credit for it. Her name may have been lost, but her legacy remained, alive in every generation that inherited a realm she quietly protected. History remembered the throne, but the empire itself remembered her, even if it no longer knew her name.